Jets X Factor. All three of us are together finally for the first time. Joe Blewett, Michael Nania, Sabo, and we're going to have this podcast in all three feeds on YouTube, on the website, and we're going to discuss the offseason. We're going to round it up right now, and we'll kick it to Nania to start. Nania, give us your initial thoughts on the offseason.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing when you're just looking at the offseason as a whole is just Joe Douglas and his overall, just the overall mentality and approach that he's had, the way he's valued certain positions, the way that they should be, specifically with the offensive line. We knew that was such a huge need, and he attacked it really aggressively. And a lot of the moves he made, you could have your own questions about the players that he added, but I mean, those questions for most fans, you don't know enough about those players to really question them. But the fact that he was aggressive, attacking the offensive line, taking Becton in the first round after making a lot of moves in free agency, then went out and got a receiver in round 2. The fact that they actually, because the whole time you're projecting the draft, we were hoping they'd go tackle receiver, and they actually did it. Every single year we have this hope about how they're going to do it, and it never actually happens. And finally we get it, and it's actually what they should have done. So just Douglas, his entire, and also in free agency, just not overpaying, drawing a line in the sand and not crossing it. He was just so balanced, emphasized the right positions, and attacked the needs that they need to attack. So I think that's the biggest thing, the fact that Douglas really came out and showed that we can have faith in him, that he's going to emphasize what needs to be emphasized. He's not going to be tugged around in free agency or overpay in trades. Things like that have just been really impressive from Douglas.
Yeah.
Just to add on to that, and Nania laid it out pretty perfectly that the Jets didn't pay the Jets tax, which is great. They're not getting tossed around. And that he addressed the premium positions we needed to. He saw that the offensive line was an issue. He addressed receiver to a certain extent. I think that's like my one gripe with the receiver. I would like to see a little bit more done there this season. He attacked outside linebacker in the third round. Did the best he can do. I know there's still guys like Golden out there, Vinny Curry, who I know us three, at least in the Slack channel, we're talking about a guy like Vinny Curry coming in situational downs. Corner he attacked as well. It's not a position that's top heavy. There's definitely more of depth there and competition, which is a positive. So in general, without going position by position, I like that he attacked the positions of need and didn't overspend. And there's some people who will speak about, okay, well, they should have got Glasgow. They should have got Conklin. They should have signed Robbie Anderson. And I come from the perspective of how do we know what he offered? I don't think it's as simple as Madden. Okay, Robbie Anderson got offered $12 million the first year and $8 million the next year, $20 million total from the Panthers for 2 years. If the Jets offered 22, he was coming to the Jets. We don't know if he negotiated with them. He didn't want to come back for Gase. There's a bunch of things that happened or that happened behind the scenes that we really don't know about. So in general, I like what he did. I would have added maybe a guy different or two, maybe changed a thing or two different in the draft. But overall, from my perspective, it was a pretty solid offseason, building a foundation and building depth on the team that we clearly needed.
Yeah, and I think about it from a simplistic point of view that they've gone down the hype train so many off seasons over and over and over again. Douglas is a former offensive lineman, and he knows what wins. It's an inside-out game. Still is, no matter what has happened with the rules, with the points, with the yards, with the scoring. And, yeah, he did go quantity over quality in the eyes of many in a general view. But competition up front, they have 9 guys who could start up front on that line, this season. So raising the competition bar on the offensive line this August was something that I think he wanted to do, and he really did it. So from that simplistic point of view, I loved what he did. And cornerback, yep, they all fit that certain prototype where it fits the zone, what Greg Williams likes to do. They're not shutdown corners, but they're hard to find these days. And like you said, edge is the only position where, you kind of come away feeling like he didn't really nail it. Darnold, what do you guys think about Darnold this year? Positives, negatives, best sort of season with Gase. Nania, what do you think? Is Darnold ready for the Pro Bowl?
Yeah, I think that, he's still only 23 years old. He was the youngest opening week starter in history. So he could have, I think it's reasonable to expect he will have just a longer growth curve than most quarterbacks do. Guys like Jackson, Watson, Mahomes have just set the bar so high with these year two jumps. But that really wasn't the norm before that. Quarterback typically was a position where, they would sit for 2-3 years. And when they did start, it wouldn't be until their third, fourth year that they broke out. So Darnold could very well be that kind of quarterback. So for me this year, at least from a production standpoint, and then also when you're just looking at him independent of that, just hoping that he can be above average in that 12 to 16 range among starting quarterbacks. And it's all going to start with the offensive line if he can get adequate protection, and also in the run game if they can just set him up with more reasonable second, third downs. Because the first down run game was a huge issue. They were so bad running the ball on first down that he always had to dig them out of second and third and long. So that can't happen again. So it's all going to start with that offensive line. And you look at the games where they have protected him well. Darnold has already been producing at a really high level. So if they can protect him well, and we're not even looking for them to be elite, the offensive line, if they can just be okay, then it should be enough for us to really see where Darnold is at in his progression. So I'm hoping to see him be in that 12 to 16 range this year. He can be a lot better than that long term. He could even do that this year, but at least that's what I'm hoping to see, in that above average range. And it's all going to start with the protection up front for him to just get that chance to just have enough time to be able to be in favorable second, third down situations, to not have to be running for his life constantly like he has the past couple of years. So if the O-line could just be at least competent, then he should be able to get the opportunity to show us where he's at.
Yeah. His career's been interesting because as we all know, watching the film, doing all the stats. Well, I don't do the stats. That's all Nania. I don't know. Yeah. I don't know what Nania does, but does stats for 12 hours a day.
That's Nania's numbers right there.
Yeah. So he obviously it's been a little bit of a roller coaster ride. Him being 20 years old, 21 years old when he took his first start, in Detroit. He's had a roller coaster ride, which is expected with young guys, but I think the dips have been lower than some others. But he's put in the worst situation of all the other young quarterbacks. Then Baker, look at the talent he has on his team. Look at Lamar Jackson. Look at what Josh Allen's working with up in Buffalo. I think if you put Sam Darnold on the Bills right now, he already is where Nani is talking about at that average 12 to 16 and even above. When he was drafted, the talent I saw on film, I thought he could be, the peak as a top 5 guy, but I think he would be a top 10 guy. That's obviously hoping that he had, good talent around him, had good coaching around him as well, which he obviously hasn't had. We can get into Gase later if we do. Then fine. I'm not as low on Gase as some people are, just based on what he's been dealt throughout his career, both with the Jets and with the Dolphins. The Dolphins looking at about half of his games missing a starting quarterback with the Jets. I would like to see any offensive coordinator in the 3 games that Darnold missed to produce with Falk or whoever the hell they had in all those games, Webb and whoever else was there. So I think he's put in a tough position, but at the same time, he's also a coach who didn't run enough outside zone against the Bengals at sometimes. So it's frustrating. He's a guy who tries to outsmart himself. So I'm worried about that with Darnold. I want to see Darnold more on the move. But then Darnold also has his things to improve on as well. He's a guy who will take the risks that he doesn't need to take. He needs to take a check down at times. His footwork is something I rarely see footwork improve from college to the NFL. I don't know if you guys could assist me on that and say anybody who you've seen, but I have personally not really seen accuracy or footwork really improve drastically. So I think he's always going to be that guy who throws from that open stance, who throws, steps in the bucket, who fades back, who uses all arm. I think he's always going to be a gunslinger mentality. But now we're looking for not 21 touchdowns and around, 12 picks, whatever. Now we're looking for 30, 35, 40 touchdowns in the coming years, maybe with 15 picks. I think he's always going to be a guy who's like 12 plus picks just because of his mentality he has. But we're also hoping at the same time that he can learn to check it down, But like Nania said, at the same time, he's put in a terrible position. No run game. His snap to throw, getting pressured, getting hit, is at a ridiculously high rate for a young guy. With the lack of talent at receiver, let's be honest. It's not like he has a bad offensive line, but like Deshaun Watson, he has DeAndre Hopkins who you just throw the ball up to on third down. Like Anderson is at best a decent, and I hate using the labels number 1, number 2, but a decent number 2 at best. And then past that last year, Nunwa went out. You had Crowder, who was a good slot receiver, but other than that, Herndon was out. Bell. Listen, I think Bell is also a guy who he's still a good running back, but there's a reason that running back is the most invaluable position on a team, and it's because of how largely dependent it is on the offensive line. You could put the best running back of all time behind the Jets offensive line last year, and maybe they don't produce 3.4 yards per carry, whatever it was last year, but they're not getting over 4. So Darnold was put in a tough position last year. So I'm hoping with the improvement from the offensive line, that he'll obviously be more consistent, but it's a concern obviously with this offseason as well. Offensive line, you need that cohesion, and they don't have games and practices to rep it out. So it's definitely going to be a concern where they might be really rusty for the first couple of games, which is definitely concerning when you're looking at Buffalo, San Fran, et cetera, in the first couple of weeks. So.
Yeah, footwork. I look at footwork like a basketball shot. It's just
it is what it is.
It's the way you grew up playing the game. It's the way you grew up building your craft. And he can overcome footwork. You can, as a quarterback, overcome it. On tape, Blewett, what do you think his singular biggest problem is? Is there a singular problem? For example, progressions, or is it more just a mix of everything? Like you said, gunslinger attitude. Sometimes he does lock on to progressions pre-snap. Mm-hmm. He thinks he knows where, if it's a 3-step, he thinks he knows where he's going to go. And he doesn't see the second read. Is that the biggest problem, or is it a mix of a lot of things?
Yeah, it's definitely a mix, and I haven't done a deep dive on the 2019 season. But in general, from watching obviously and knowing him, like you said, I think he goes through progressions a little bit slow at times. I think that, like you said, pre-snap he'll see a matchup that he wants, and he'll even look at that matchup. And then check another matchup. Like let's say it's Jamison Crowder over the middle on a jerk route that's wide open. And then he'll even pass off that to throw where he wanted to throw. So I think he just needs to trust his eyes in terms of seeing guys open. And also, like you said, the footwork, it's something to me that I've seen from quarterbacks. You can get over it 9 out of 10 reps, but that 10th rep, that ball might sail. Because, if you're trying to, there's two consistently, like you said, opening, throwing from open stance, stepping in the bucket, fading backwards, where when he's trying to hit that, that 18-yard, out or comeback or whatever it may be, that is going to hurt him. So I think it's going to show up a rep or two, which is something you could live with. It's as long as you hit 9 out of 10 of those throws, you should be fine, because he's also been a guy who's been deadly accurate at times where other guys can't be. He needs to improve on his deep ball to me, and that comes a lot with the footwork, where he tends to put it all in his arm instead of using the proper footwork, setting the hallway, stepping through, really rotating through your hips. Instead, he kind of just throws all arm, which is obviously, it leads to issues. So I think deep ball, not locking onto reads both post and pre-snap, hitting guys that are open, not trying to force balls into windows. He should not. But like I said, at the same time, then you see him rolling out and hit, it's funny, like every Jets fan's account, how many times have I seen that Jamison Crowder play on Twitter this year? It's like ridiculous. Mm-hmm. Like he makes
I'm guilty of that. I think I posted it like 3 times.
You're a part of the problem, Nania. Yeah. No, it's okay. So yeah, it's he's made some ridiculous throws. I just think he needs to hone it in a little bit, and he needs to get more comfortable in the offense. Which is, again, it's so multi-layered with this. Is okay. Well, now we want him to be comfortable with the offense. Now, what if Gase is fired next year? Now he's in his third offense, in 4 years. So there's a mixture of things, but I would say deep ball, not locking on pre and post snap, and then the footwork obviously does hurt him, at times.
Let's talk draft. Mekhi Becton, number 11. Denzel Mims, second, which I think everyone's thrilled with. AJ Green, you compared him to Blewett. Mm-hmm. I think that's dead on. His feet on the sideline. Mm-hmm. Go up, get it at the high point. He does all those things that a potential number one guy could do. Nania, what do you think about the draft? Joe Douglas's first draft.
Yeah, I think the way that the first two rounds played out were about as perfectly as you could have hoped. They were able to stay at number 11 and get one of the 4 tackles, which going in, there were kind of some talk that they might not have been able to get that choice. So they were thinking about trading up. So they didn't have to do that. And they got their choice out of 2 of them. And, that's something we'll be watching in the years to come. Becton against Tristan Wirfs. I kind of preferred Wirfs, but it was really, other than Jedrick Wills being above the other 3 guys, which they were so close to getting him. I was rooting hard for that. Other than Wills being ahead of the pack, the other 3 guys, I would have taken any of them. So taking Becton over Wirfs, I think there's obviously a higher ceiling. But, we'll see what happens in terms of this year because Becton's going to play such a huge part. We talk about the O-line being so important for Darnold and the entire offense. Becton's going to be a huge part of that. And you give every rookie, regardless of position, but especially at left tackle, you give them patience and you live with a tough rookie season if they have it. But it's going to be so important for him to play well right away if this O-line is going to get better. But like I said, at the same time, if he doesn't, you have that patience and hope that he breaks out after that, which he very well could. But that played out really well in the first round, getting Becton. And then the second round, being able to trade down and still get Mims after Mims unexpectedly falling to that, I believe it's a 48th pick.
Yeah.
Him falling to 48. And you could argue the way it played out was great, trading down, still getting him. But you could argue they probably should have just stayed there and taken him, considering the need at receiver and how lucky they were that he actually fell there, considering the run on all the great receivers that were available there at the top of the second round. But I think Mims definitely a better prospect than guys, a few who went ahead of him, Van Jefferson, KJ Hamler, T. Higgins, a few guys like that. He's either in their neighborhood or better than them. So I really don't know why he fell that far. Maybe we'll see going forward why, but it was a surprise to get him. So those first 2 rounds played out great. Then after that, not that it was hit or miss, but I think there are some things that I maybe would have done differently. I know with Davis now, with uncertainty, with Jamal Adams, having him could help, but he's not a strong safety. And I'm looking at your film review, Joe, really revealed a lot of, I think, flaws that make him very questionable in terms of what he can do this year, but not just this year, long-term also, just if he can actually pan out at all. But I think Zuniga's a solid pick. There were some other edge rushers who maybe could have been higher floor picks in that spot. But they did go, edge being the 3rd biggest need, they did go after that on day 3. And then Morgan, that pick was an interesting one. Obviously, they need a backup, but to expect a 4th round rookie from Florida International to come in and fill that role. And they did pick up Flacco, but it's just not something that has worked out a lot recently, drafting a long-term backup. You only get him for a few years. You obviously have your franchise guy. So that was debatable. I probably wouldn't have done that. But I like the P. Ryan pick. He definitely can fill in. He could definitely come in right away and be that running back too. Obviously, they have Gore, but he can right away give you some depth, just has a versatile skill set, can do a lot of things well fundamentally, even if he isn't the best, even if he doesn't have like unbelievable agility or breakaway speed, just a really good all-around player. Can be that Bilal Powell long-term, I think. Sort of what Powell gave to them, and maybe take over for Bell next year. Obviously, I like the Braden Mann pick on the special teams. The special teams guy, I'm always thinking about that. I think he can be an upgrade over Edwards. And Bryce Hall, that might be my favorite pick of the draft. I was looking at him a few rounds earlier. For him to fall that far, that was a big-time steal, I think, will turn out to be. We'll see if he does anything this year, but in terms of long-term, I definitely think. And he's also a great fit with what the defense Greg was playing, Greg Williams, in the second half. So I like the Hall pick. Cameron Clark, his film was really good for a 4th round pick from Charlotte. So overall, I think it was just in terms of value, I think the value was good with most of their picks. He attacked positions of need, but also didn't reach to do that. So I think that's the biggest thing from Douglas's perspective, filling needs, but not reaching to do it. If you can do that, I think it's a good, the approach is what matters. He was able to fill the holes, not reach to do it. So I think that's promising from Douglas.
Yeah, I remember during the draft at like 10, we were all in the Slack channel, like dying, like hoping, just praying, because Wills, I really liked Wills as well. I was higher personally on Wirfs than Becton. In my defense, that was pre me getting a ton of all 22 and watching his pass sets. I heard the pass sets were really a thing to be concerned about. After watching the pass sets, I'm not as concerned as I was. I think there will be some instances where versus certain complex blitzes or stunts that he might struggle a little bit just because of his lack of not awareness to it, but he hasn't been exposed to it a ton throughout his career at Louisville. But in terms of his raw footwork, balance, knee bend, angles of his arms, his punch, etc. I think he's pretty solid in the pass game. So I'm actually higher on him in the pass game than other people are, and I'm actually a little bit lower on him in the run game. Like, I don't think he's gonna come out and dominate in the run game like some other people think he will. I think he could, but it's a lot of technique as well. You could dominate with bad technique in college when you're playing guys who are 230 pounds who don't really know how to stack guys, but in the NFL it's gonna be a little bit different. So I think he will have some struggles in both areas, but overall in terms of the long term, I get it. I think it's the highest ceiling of all these guys in terms of the long term. And it seems like Joe Douglas really wanted that nasty guy, which obviously Becton's the nastiest guy out of the four the top four that were taken. So I really like that pick. Obviously, we were fighting with a lot of people who might have liked Judy or Ruggs or whatever. But if the Jets took a receiver over offensive line there, I would be greatly concerned for what Douglas thinks.
Yeah. It was just so deep. The receivers were just too deep to do that. Way too deep.
Exactly. And Nania, I completely agree with you. People haven't brought that up a lot in terms of the Mims pick, but I love Mims. And like you said, Sabo, I compared him to AJ Green. Me and Marcus, and listen, trust me, there are guys who I will kill. People love Greg Dortch last year. I killed him. There's certain guys in this draft who I don't like. I love Mims. I think that he could be the best receiver in this draft long term. I think that he was probably my number 4 guy below the top big 3, maybe even 3 to Ruggs. I think Ruggs is a little bit overrated, but I could see why he fell. Even maybe like 5, 6, 7 receiver. I don't know how he fell to 12th or 11th.
Yeah.
Like you said, guys, I see no way possible that guys like Higgins or Pittman were better in college than Mims from what I saw. So I don't get that. But at the same time, if he traded down and Mims wasn't there, and now you're taking a guy like Van Jefferson over Mims because you traded down, I criticize that a little bit more. Yeah, it worked out well. But at the same time, if it didn't happen, I would have been pissed. We all wanted him at 48, so just take him at 48. So, Monday morning quarterback, and it looks great. You did it. You pulled it off. But at the same time, what if it didn't happen?
That's kind of a theme of Joe Douglas's offseason. He does that, takes, huge balls to pull that off. And then the same thing with Jordan Jenkins and Brian Poole. Those two guys lingered in free agency for I don't know how long, but longer than we thought. And then they come back on, $5 million, 1 year, $5 million deals. And everyone's like, what the hell? How do you do that? I think
Jordan Jenkins is 3.5, right?
It might be 3.5, yeah. So that's the theme for Douglas.
Yeah, so he has some balls. Even though, I'm fine with that. Obviously, I love the outcome of what happened in the second round. But at the same time, if he weren't to land Mims, I would have been pretty upset, to be completely honest. I really, really like Mims. For the other picks that I like the man pick for sure. Special teams, I think for us being the website that we are, we understand how important special teams is. So I'm fine with taking a punter in the 6th round. If you're getting a great punter, a top 5, top 10 guy for the next 5-10 years, that's a lot better. Bigger of an impact than whatever receiver, whatever guy you would have taken there, considering the bust rate of those guys in those rounds. So I'm completely fine with that pick of man. Hall, like you said, Nania, it's either him or Mims. I don't know which one to like more. But getting Hall, I think in terms of the value of where he was picked, I think that's the best value you got. I think he could be a legitimate number 1, number 2 in a few years, obviously, depending on how quickly he bounces back from that injury. Like myself and Marcus talked about, torn ligaments and things like that are something that tends not to necessarily heal the best. So we have to hope that he is going to take care of it, which he seems like the guy to do that. He seems like he's super dedicated. So we have to see how he comes back from that injury. Other than that, in terms of the picks, I think those are the 3 picks I loved. The other picks, there's, I would say Zuniga and P. Ryan were kind of okay, C+, B- grades. I like them. Don't hate them. I understand why they took them. Zuniga, he's more of an interior rusher on nickel. I don't really see him creating a ton from the edge, minus the run game, because he just doesn't have that bend. Yeah. I'm not comparing him necessarily to Jadeveon Clowney, but he's more of like a straight line explosive athlete like that, but doesn't have the best bend. So I don't see him making a ton of impact from the edge. So the Jets seem to have a decent amount of those guys who aren't super twitchy. So I would like them to see them maybe make a different pick there. So I give that like a C+, B-, whatever. P. Ryan, again, all-around guy. I don't hate that pick. A lot of people wanted a more explosive guy there, but I think for a guy in that round, a lot of people have compared him to Bilal Powell, not necessarily directly because of their game, like on a one-to-one basis, but in terms of like them providing like an all-around decent type guy. If we get a Bilal Powell where we picked P. Ryan, I think that's a great pick. Obviously a little bit different in terms of traits, but sort of similar. So I think that's a fine pick. The picks I don't like, I agree with Nania on that, is Morgan. Didn't really love it too much. I think they need to go another receiver at that point in the draft. There's still some guys we all wanted, I believe. So I wasn't a big fan of that. But at the same time, I get them needing backup quarterback, but still not a huge fan. And then the other pick, Davis, was another guy who hearing everybody, like all the big wigs out there, I love this guy. His instincts are so great. He's the leader on the team. I did not see that at all on film. The same thing with Cashman last year. Cashman, I heard like the stat, he didn't miss any tackles at wherever he played, Minnesota, whatever school it was, I forget. And then the first game I watched, he missed like 3 tackles. I was like, what is this? So,
and both guys are really athletic. I mean, that's the thing. Yeah.
So it's easy to see on YouTube highlights. Okay, yeah, he makes all these plays, but a lot of the plays that I saw that he was making, he was locked onto the quarterback, and he broke on the throw when the quarterback threw the ball. In college, that works. In the NFL, that does not work. So he was reading the quarterback a lot. He's not a good tackler. From what I saw, he's able to play man because he's athletic enough. He has the fluid hips. He has the stop start. He has the acceleration. But in terms of the technique, it's not there. So yeah, he might be a great athlete, but at the athleticism in the NFL is 5% of it. 10% of it. 90% of it is the mental and the technique, and he did not have that to me when I saw him. So I didn't like the Davis pick. A lot of people were, he should have been a first rounder, second rounder. I think that's crap. I didn't see that. So I'm not too high on that pick, to be completely honest. He's a really raw pick. If he develops, great. He could be that center fielder because he has that track speed, but that's a large, a jump to take to him being a starter for me. So I guess that's my overall thoughts about, diving into play-by-play basis. So.
Yeah. Defense. Well, Jamal Adams. Let's hit on Jamal Adams real quick because we have to because that is the off-season number one topic. And listen, he's been a good soldier over the last 2 weeks, right? Week or so, whatever. I think he's got to re-immerse himself into the culture. He knows training camp's coming up. I think all he's done is lower his value around the league based on what he's done. Because once you show that you're willing to do whatever it takes to get your way, teams, no matter how good you are, will look at you in a different way, in a different light. So he's been a good soldier. But where do the Jets go from here? How does it play out? Obviously, after the draft, it's a lot more different than before the draft. It's really tough to make superstar trades. Champ Bailey for Clinton Portis doesn't happen every day. So, Nania, what are your first thoughts? How do you think this plays out?
Yeah, it's just such a tough situation because I feel like a lot of the key details we don't really know because it seems like he just, regardless of the money, it just seems like there's someone in the organization. Maybe it's Gase, maybe it's someone else, maybe it's a combination of a lot of things, but it just seems like he doesn't really want to be there. And not to the extent that he's going to sit the season out because he's going to miss out on a lot of money if he does. So he's definitely going to suit up. The Jets they didn't panic and he'll be playing for them, but it just doesn't seem like he wants to be there. So I feel like there are details we don't know in terms of why that's the case. But I think from a Jets perspective, Douglas, again, is kind of just stuck it out. Like maybe McCagnon would have pulled the trigger on a trade by this point. We don't know. That's just speculation. But Douglas is not the guy who's going to let a player force his way out like that and just take below market value to get him out. So I like that Douglas kind of has, at least to this point, stuck to it. And if they do trade him at some point, you're going to want a pretty big package for him because I think he's the best safety in the league and definitely what he provides just the different ways he can help you, just make it easier to call your defense with the different amount of roles he can take on is really unique. So I think they would want a pretty big package, talking about, if not multiple first round picks, a first rounder, and a player who can contribute for you right away, a very good player. So if they do trade him, they're going to need something big. But how it's going to play out, it's just so tough to project. There are a lot of moving pieces. I think the Jets are really going to have to, if they want to extend him, work on mending that relationship a little bit in terms of in the building. Woody Johnson's not helping that out right now, but it'll be interesting to see how it plays out. But for me, my preference would be just getting him locked up, because I think he's a fantastic player who can help them out for a long time. But hopefully that's what happens. But we'll see what happens. And I think because I think from the beginning, like, the Jets' standpoint has been that they are planning to extend him. They're just doing what you do, and that's, let his rookie contract play out, take advantage of those cheap years like the team should, and he'll get his money next year. And I think that is what the Jets are planning to do. So I think that is what I would count on playing out. Just season will go through. They'll extend him at some point, if not during this year, next year. But we'll see if Adams, even at this point, would like to sign with them, or if he really is hell-bent on getting out of there.
Yeah, I Saba, when you were asking a question and laying it out, I think it's an interesting point too, that, post-draft, it's really hard to trade a guy. And then layered with that, is there going to be a college football season, this year? And how is that scouting going to be? So there's multiple layers to this in terms of the draft pick trade. And I would like a player and a pick, because picks are great, but they're dart throws. And what are the chances that one of those players equal to Jamal Adams, or even both of those players equal to Jamal Adams? Yeah. I think if you were to make 2 first-round draft picks, let's say in the middle of the rounds, if you were to land 2 solid players in their long-term career, that would be a kind of above expectation for what those players would be. And I don't think 2 solid players equals Jamal Adams, who is the best safety in the NFL. And I've had arguments with people for either way on this. I think the Jets have had 3 or 4 generational players since the year 2000, and that's Ben Curtis Martin, Jamal Adams, Darrelle Revis. You can argue Nick Mangold. That's it. So I don't see getting rid of him for, let's say, let's just say like Jets' recent draft history, which we'd hope, Joe Douglas would be better than this, but Leonard Williams, and let's say even Sheldon Richardson, like 2 guys who were like, okay, decent to solid. Like, even if they got 2 level players of that doesn't equal Jamal Adams in my mind. But at the same time, Joe Douglas comes from organizations like Philly, like Baltimore, who don't like to get pushed around. And I think that if he didn't open his mouth, he might have gotten paid already. But it shows it's a bad precedent for Joe Douglas to set to give the money to the squeaky wheel. So if he weren't to come out publicly and do all the stuff with, I'm trying to get to Dallas and all this stuff, I want to go to these playoff teams, he might have been signed. But at this point, it makes Joe Douglas look bad to sign him. So is that why he's being quiet? Did he get word from whoever it is, agent, who might have led him in the wrong direction? It seemed like initially anyway. Hey, shut up. These guys are getting paid now. Maybe you can get paid. So I think Jamal Adams screwed himself. I think he didn't go about it the right way. If you wanted to get traded, if you truly wanted to get traded, go to the Jets behind closed doors, say you want to get traded, and because that maximizes your value. You coming out, like you said, Sabo, and saying, I want to get traded. Now his trade value diminishes. Now it's going to be harder for the Jets to trade you. So if you really wanted to get traded, you didn't do it in the right way regardless. So he put himself in this position where they're going to get lower trade value, and now they might not even be able to sign him because of what it looks like for the Jets organization and for Joe Douglas. But at the same time, with saying all that, I would like to sign him. Maybe it's not. Maybe it's in training camp. Maybe it's by week 5, 6, 7, 8. Maybe it's next offseason. I don't think it's going to be by next offseason. There'd be too much things going on. But I would like him to be signed, because the Jets don't have generational players very often, and he's a guy you could build a defense around truly. So I want him signed, but I think he kind of screwed himself and screwed the Jets, either for getting signed or for getting traded. He just didn't go about it the right way at all.
And the shame of it all is that Jets fans are now trying to minimize his play in the field because they're sore and they don't.
Can I interject?
Yeah,
I heard somebody say today that Davis is better than Jamal Adams in coverage. I swear to God, I saw that on Twitter. So
Jamal Adams' coverage is phenomenal. And then the leap he took from year 1 to year 2 was ridiculous. He is the best safety in the league. I think he's the best safety in franchise history already. You're first team All-Pro, second team All-Pro. They don't have a rich tradition there. You can't minimize his play. And he's done it without a legitimate pass rush. He's done it. I know
legitimate corners.
Or legitimate corners. So he's covered up so many holes in that defense. You just can't minimize what he does on the field. You could feel sore. You could hate him if you want, but don't do that. Speaking of that defense, Greg Williams, what do you expect this year? Do you expect with the additions, the defense to go up the ranking? I think, where did they rank last year? 10th by DVOA? It was 10th or 9th or 10th.
Somewhere around there.
Yeah. Do you expect it to go up? Do you expect it to decline? Because they don't have that edge still. They don't have that playing space edge. Nania, what do you think? Greg Williams.
Yeah, Greg did such a fantastic job last year, but the tough thing with projecting them is there are things both positive and negative going for them. Hopefully you get Mosley and Williamson back for the entire season, and if you do get that, it's a huge upgrade over the linebacker play from last year. And other than that, not too much change on the defense. So cornerback is going to be the big X factor. What are you going to get from them after, you had Tremaine Johnson, Roberts, Harrison playing very badly, and then you switch them out for Bless Austin and Arthur Millette, who, even though they're not fantastic, they did hold it down pretty well in the second half. So are they going to be able to is Bless Austin, specifically him, because I really like his upside. He played well in the second half. Is he going to maintain that? Is he going to fall back down to earth? We'll see what he does. And then the cornerback depth chart is just, it's deep. It doesn't have any top end talent or a legitimate number one corner, but you have competition there. So there are there's a lot that could go right. You only need one or two of those players to go right out of the about five you have there competing. So we'll see what happens with that position. But the biggest thing is with linebacker, you could get a lot better if you have Mosley and Williamson back. But at the same time, when they had that surge defensively last year, they were playing the Redskins and Dwayne Haskins, Daniel Jones and the Giants, the Steelers and their two terrible quarterbacks, the Bills, who weren't even trying to play in Week 17. So the competition was very bad in that second half. So as good as they played, the competition could barely have been any easier. And then this year, you're going to be playing teams like Kansas City, Seattle. Buffalo's offense could be improved. Just the competition is going to be tougher. And even regardless of who is on the schedule, just because of how easy the opponents were in the second half last season, it helped them out a lot. So even though there could be upgrades at linebacker just by getting healthier, Quinnen Williams, maybe he takes a big step up. I think he will, especially as a pass rusher. Nathan Shepard as well. I think he played really well as a pass rusher in the second half. If you can get a full season of him, the interior pass rush could really help mask the edge as much as they could, because that's still going to be a big weakness. They didn't do much of anything there to boost the edge rush. So there are things going both ways. You have the linebackers back, but you also are looking at a schedule that could be pretty tough and just as flat out not, rookie quarterbacks and teams preparing for the playoffs, which is what they faced when they played well in the second half last year. So I think the biggest thing is going to be how much, in addition to the health of Mosley Williamson, is how big of a leap can Quinnen Williams take? Because if he can, fulfill the potential that he had coming in, then and be the player that we still think he can be. He's only played 1 year. It's ridiculous to just toss him aside after what was just one season. But if he can fulfill that potential and be a very good pass rusher, then I think that could help mask a lot of what you have in the edge. Not all of it. They still need to fix that at some point starting next season. But if Williams can take that leap, I think that can help the pass rush quite a bit.
Yeah, I think overall it's going to be upgraded now by statistics than where they finish. I don't know, but we obviously, and it's the example that everybody goes to in terms of the defense and how much they can be improved. But look at Buffalo, first three quarters versus Buffalo, fourth quarter with C.J. Mosley, even minus Mosley and Williamson, who I think is underrated by Jets fans. I like Williamson a lot more than some others do. I think he's better in coverage than people realize, and he is a really good blitzer and a force in the run game. game. I've seen him plant 320-pound offensive guards on their asses and make a tackle on a running back, which is ridiculous for a guy who's 240 pounds. So I really like the inside linebacker duo. I think that's honestly, the middle of the defense is really strong.
Yeah.
And you talk about Quinnen Williams, Michael, it's people giving up on him after year one. What if people gave up on Lorenzo Fatukasi after year one, or Nathan Shepard, or even a guy like Terrell Basham, who wasn't on the Jets year one, and now he's I would say he's a decent role player for the Jets. So Quinnen Williams undoubtedly will take steps in the right direction. In my opinion of him, I think he got a little bit heavy in his hands, and he was a little bit overzealous at times. And also with Nania breaking down the stats, he was used as the picker, the penetrator a lot, and stunts and asked to take up blocks. Now, that's slightly concerning because if he was playing great, he would probably be asked to be the looper or asked to win on one-on-one, and they would isolate some matchups for him. So slightly concerning, but at the same time, it's a year one for a guy who's 21 years old. So I think he'll take a step up. From there, you have Shepard, you have Fatukasi, you have McClendon, who's been criminally underrated his entire career. I think he's one of the best run-stuffing defensive linemen in the NFL. The inside linebacker duo is, if not the best, I would say easily top 5. I'm not sure all the other ones, but it's definitely top 5 easily. The safety duo, again, if Jamal Adams is here and Marcus May, another one, top 5, I would think. And I think that's being generous. You could argue 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, whatever it is, but up the middle, each unit I would say is top 5. Now, when you go to the edges, that's the concern. They don't have that pass rusher. They don't have that corner. Desir, I think at best he's like a 2017 Morris Claiborne. That's what I've compared him to. A guy who won't get beat deep a ton, but at the same time is a little bit frustrating. Will open his hips up too early and give up. He'll give 7 yards of cushion on 3rd and 5 and backpedal, which is frustrating to see. So he's not a great corner. I think at best he's an okay number 2, but I think on a good team he's like a solid role player who comes in and plays maybe 50% of the snaps. So they're still lacking severely at corner. Even though they added some depth, you have to hope Paul continues to take steps in the right direction. Bless Austin, will he be healthy? Will he be healthy? So that's 2 guys you hope to develop in the long term. So I think they'll be better because they're young and they're developing the defensive line. Their linebackers are coming back, and even minus those guys, it's not even the top 2 guys who were injured. Cashman went down at a certain point. Hewitt went down at a certain point. You're playing with Burgess as your starting linebacker, who wasn't on the team to start the year, and they had to sign him back to start for the Jets. So they were severely injured on defense, but at the same time, like Nania said, they're playing the Chiefs. They're playing the Niners. They're playing the Bills now twice. They're playing the Broncos, who have a ton of offensive talent. The Seahawks. So the Colts, which we'll see what Phillip Rivers is. I think he's pretty shot, but at the same time, their offensive line is plenty to go against. By itself. The Patriots twice with Cam Newton. I'm scared to see what they could do with Cam Newton, to be completely honest, because they're geniuses on offense, and now having a guy who could run a lot more RPO and things like that than Tom Brady could, it's going to open up some dimensions that they didn't have before. So I'm a little bit scared of them as well. So I think they're going to be a better defense overall. They're really strong up the middle. They're lacking at the positions, the biggest 2 positions at edge rusher and corner. And you can argue corner now. I think edge rusher is definitely one, but steps in the right direction. I'm just not sure how they finish statistically because of the guys they're playing. Because my worry with the Jets defense is, okay, we're not gonna be in 12, 13, 21 personnel, and that's going to take guys like Fatukasi and Shepard and McClendon off the field. And now we're going to go in 10 personnel. And now instead of those guys, now we're going to be seeing your 3rd, 4th, 5th string corner and your 3rd and 4th safety. So that's my concern with the Jets defense. So steps in the right direction, but they still need the building at the biggest positions on the defense.
All right, we'll hit a couple more topics here. Speaking of the defense, undrafted free agents came to mind. Bryce Huff. On the offense, you got the receivers, Campbell, Lawrence Cager. And the NFL announced not only will fans not attend in Jersey, but training camp rosters will start at 80 instead of 90, and there will be no preseason games. I think that's official. I'm not sure. I know the NFLPA was told there'd be no preseason games. That's the report right now. If that comes to pass, do any of these undrafted free agents have a chance? And if they do, who do you have your eye on? Nania.
It's going to make it so tough. First of all, the fact that you have the roster cut down by 10, that's going to take a majority of them out of the mix already. Or they could probably cut some of the random fringe players and keep some of those guys. But a few of those undrafted guys are already going to be out because of that. And then not having the preseason just makes it even tougher. Like, just think of Robbie Anderson, who was the Jets' top receiver for the past 3 years, probably never would have played for them if he didn't get the 2016 preseason to show what he could do. And he played so well in that 2016 preseason. Probably would have never played for them at all if he didn't get that opportunity. So it's going to change so much for them. But I think Bryce Huff is obviously the one guy that stands out as having the best shot. Edge is such a position of need for them. He was really productive at Memphis. And I think just looking at him play, he, not that he should have been a first-round pick or anything, but he was probably draft worthy. He didn't get the chance to go to the combine or have his pro day. So that definitely hurt him. So he's probably a 5th round, maybe 6th round talent who they were able to sign undrafted free agency. So considering his talent level compared to other undrafted free agents and the need at edge, I think he has the best shot. Receiver is another position where they don't have depth. So Cager or Campbell could definitely make a play, because you look at past Mims, Perriman, Jameson, Crowder, and especially in the outside, considering Crowder's a slot guy, there's just not a lot of depth there. Vincent Smith is probably the top guy outside those top 3. And, he has 1 career touchdown, and that was rushing. And other than him, the best is Josh Doxson, Braxton Berrios. Berrios does have some upside, especially in the slot, but just not a lot of depth. So the receivers, Cager and Campbell, could make a play. But if I were going to pick one to make the team, it would be Huff. But considering these changes, it's just going to be so hard for any of them to do it.
Yeah, I think there's 3 guys who have a realistic shot. And you could argue, and a lot of people, we know how many freaking mock drafts did we do. Lamar Jackson was that popular guy in the 6th round because he has the same name, corner. The Jets need him. He's always there. But watching a little bit of him, I don't see it. So the corners and him and Guidry has, some speed. But other than that, again, it's like 90% mental and technique. So I don't see it with him. The offensive tackle, Hilbers, or I forget exactly what his name is, to be honest.
Jared Hilbers.
Yeah, I tried to find film on him, couldn't find a lick of film on him, so that's why I can't remember his name, because I didn't do any film on him. But they gave him the largest guarantee, which is obviously reason to think, okay, the Jets like him, considering the lack of depth at some positions, especially offensive tackle. Minus the 3 guys that they have, with Udoka, Fant, and Becton, who is that 4th guy. So he might be able to step in there. I like your point about the receivers as well. You obviously have the top 3 guys, don't need to name them. They seem to like Vincent Smith a lot, and Berrios was obviously good on special teams, so I think that's the lock as a 4 or 5. Now that 6th guy, and could they carry 7? Yeah, maybe they do, maybe they don't. But for that 6th spot, if there's only 6, I think it comes between Cager, who is that outside guy, because Berrios is that slot. So where is the other outside guy? Vincent Smith, I don't think he's necessarily an outside guy either. I think he's more of a gadget guy, speed guy. So a true X, red zone guy. I think Cager might have that shot, who looked relatively productive when he was healthy, obviously battled some injuries. So if he is able to stay healthy, can he make the team? I think he has a shot. And then, like you said, I think Huff has the best shot. But Huff is also in a tough position with the Jets front 7 because they have so much talent there. Like, a lot of people talk about, and this is obviously different because it's outside linebacker, but, especially in offseason where they're not going to be able to prove themselves. People say preseason doesn't matter. It matters. It really does. Like you said, with Robbie Anderson, guys like Victor Cruz famously, lit it up in the preseason for the Giants. So it matters, but not having the chance is going to be tough. And do you take a guy like Bryce Huff over, and I think he was underused last year, but Frankie Louvu, who showed some things 2 years ago, or on the defensive line, not even Shepard or Fadaka, they're not going to get cut, but guy like John Franklin Myers, who with the Rams actually showed some flashes. He was just injured all of last year. So is Huff going to make the team? Maybe. If he does, I think he'll be like that 3rd down rush specialist. I would love for him to make the team because he does have that raw athleticism he needs to be successful for the edge. So those are the 3 guys I think could make it, but it's such a tough position this year with the lack of training camp, with the lack of preseason, no preseason, like you said, is the report as of now. So tough spot, but I'm hoping, those guys can step up and make the team. Obviously, you want to develop the young guys. We're in a position where we don't necessarily need to carry veterans. We're not making it to the playoffs. Maybe you could, but we're not making deep playoff run at the minimum. So those are 3 guys, but their chances are low just because of what this offseason is. So,
yeah, if they get rid of the preseason or just cut it down to 2, I think it's such a mistake after this year. You got to have preseason games because these kids these practices aren't like the 1970s where it's all out. You really need game action. And I guess we'll end it. I'm thinking about topics. We'll end it on the Jets fans' favorite topic, Adam Gase. I think I agree with Blewett where Gase, he's okay as a play caller, but the question comes with leadership, communication, that sort of thing. Is he a head coach? Nania with Gase, will this be his final year with the Jets? And what are your overall sentiments about the head coach?
Yeah, I agree with you guys in that I'm not like – a lot of fans are just completely anti-Gase, don't want to hear anything for him at all. I'm definitely not near that in any way. I'm with you guys in that. As a play caller, there are some things to like. And that's not to say he's a great play caller. He's not Sean McVay or Andy Reid. But there are some things that, his starting quarterbacks have missed so much time. Obviously, Jets have not had much of any talent. Just with the offensive line, just made things so hard for you to establish anything last year. So there are some legitimate excuses, and he still shows some good things as a play caller. So, and again, that's not to say he's great. There are still some things in terms of his approach. Just the decision making. You mentioned the Bengals game for Joe. That's just one example of him making decisions that just aren't in line with the strengths and weaknesses of his team and the opponent. So there's his decision making situationally can be better, running too much on 2nd and 3rd and long, passing too much on 3rd and 2nd and short, things like that. Just going a little bit too much, just trying to be a little bit too surprising and kind of predetermining things, overthinking things. So those are some weaknesses, but overall as a play caller, that's the reason he's here. We know he's not the most charismatic guy. So it's what he can do as a play caller that's got him this far. And, with healthier starting quarterback, better offensive line, maybe we'll see a fuller realization of some of the things he can do as a play caller. But as you said, Robbie, it's off the field where the question marks come in with him. We talked about Jamal Adams before. Could Gase be part of the reason he wants out? Maybe, maybe not. But I think that's the biggest thing. And that's part of why Greg Williams is there, to kind of fill that void a little bit. A lot of players probably see him as the de facto head coach, with Gase not really filling that role too much. But Bell has backed him up off the field. So I think that's the biggest thing. Off the field, his relationships with the players. But it's just hard for us from the outside to really know how well he does in that role, because we can watch his press conferences, things like that, but it just comes down to just the smallest of levels in the locker room, in the film room, how he connects with his players, and things like that we don't really know. But I think that is clearly the biggest question with him. And then just the fact that on the field, we make all these not necessarily excuses, because they are legitimate, the talent, the injuries, but he just hasn't fielded a single good offense yet in his 4 years as a head coach. So for all those things that we do say for him, at some point, if he is as good or of an offensive coach as, not that he claims to be, but that, he seems to be, then at some point the production has just got to be there to back it up. So, hopefully this year he gets the health at offensive line, the performance at offensive line, the health at quarterback, to actually have a legitimate chance to show you what he can do as a play caller in a fair situation. But that's the biggest thing, for him to develop Sam Darnold, to develop this offense. And you also don't want to throw Darnold into a third offense in 4 years. So the biggest thing is developing Darnold and this offense. And will he make it to next year? I lean towards yes, just because of that continuity factor. But it all comes down to Darnold and the development of Darnold and the offense. But at the same time, while we're talking about the offense, he's the head coach of the team. So the fact that we're still talking about only the offense, and it's good having Greg Williams there to run the defense and just bring that leadership factor Gase might be missing. But these are things that head coach is supposed to bring to the table. So it is a little worrying that we still have to just kind of consider that your head coach is missing all these things that head coaches should have. But if he can get the offense going, get Sam Darnold to that superstar level, then I think you can live with some of the weaknesses if he can establish that. And then you go forward from there. Will Greg Williams even still be around to fill that defensive void? How long is he going to stick around? So there are a lot of question marks, but the focus has to be on Darnold and the offense, and your judgment of him should kind of start from there, I think.
Yeah, I'm concerned with him getting fired as well, just because of not even Gase with Darnold. Now it's okay. Now Jefferson's not with Mims and Barrios and Smith, the younger guys. Now the running backs coach not with P. Ryan. Like there's a lot of turnover that happens now. Pollock, who there was some concerning things about Pollock last year, but like I've heard you on a recent podcast, Nania, talk about his track record was so high with the Bengals and other teams where he had above average offensive line. So I think people are too quick to kill him and say get rid of him. It is hard to change an offensive line and technique in 1 year. So now you're changing the offensive line, and maybe now instead of running more zone, now they want to run more power. Now maybe guys don't fit in the system as well. So there's so much turnovers that happens with coaches getting fired, and obviously the most important of them being Darnold going into his third system in 4 years. And obviously for Gase now there's built-in excuses with this year with no preseason. With the lack of continuity on the offensive line, they're easily going to at least have 4 out of 5 new starters on the offensive line. So that's a concern. And like we said with Miami, he tries to outsmart himself too much, which is an issue. There was times where I broke down, you can still go back on YouTube and watch myself and Marcus Coleman break down his offense. And we watched a couple of concepts, and Marcus, who played in the NFL, coaches in the Arena League, was literally watching this play. And he's like, even after watching this play, I don't know what defense I would call to stop this play. Like that's how good of some of his concepts were that I saw, and some of them I saw this year. But he goes away from it too much, where he'll use it once or twice and never use it again, where we see a lot of coaches nowadays, whether it be Shanahan or McVay, they build upon concepts and keeps adding wrinkles to concepts they know how a team's going to counter one concept, and they throw another wrinkle in it where it's going to screw you if you play it the way they think they're going to. So he needs to build upon certain concepts that work and not try to throw out a billion concepts and try to outsmart people. Now, maybe there were situations last year where he had to outsmart people because of how bad the talent was. And that's why I almost tapped out on Twitter at a certain point last year with the Luke Falk games and all of that. Because
Kotite comparisons in week 4, that's what I can't stand. Like,
listen,
logical.
I would like to see, and it would probably work out. It would definitely work out better, but I would like to see Bill Belichick with Luke Falk with the offensive line that he had, because his biggest problem, I believe it was Luke Falk again. I tapped out. His biggest problem in college was pressure, and now you have the worst offensive line in the league blocking for him. Like right. it was never going to work against teams with Myles Garrett, etc. It just was never going to happen. The Eagles with a really good defensive line were just absolutely pounding on the Jets. So he from a statistical standpoint, that might have put him back in Miami, having his starting quarterback for about half the games, and
24 out of 49, counting a playoff game.
Okay, so -1. So and he didn't lose any less than 7 games in Miami. So he was actually relatively successful in Miami with not the best situation, with a team, let's be honest, was not that talented, with missing their starting quarterback for about half the games. Mm-hmm. So but at the same time, with saying that, I think personally, he is an offensive coordinator. I don't think he's a head coach, because you need to manage the team. I think the Jets, if they were to fire him, need to go with a guy, and not exactly this guy, but Brant Boyer, a guy who's going to oversee the team and let the offensive guy do the offensive thing, just like Jim Harbaugh. And
Joe Judge in New York, where the head coach doesn't call the plays.
Exactly.
There's kind of two different themes. There's the offense, the teams that have 2 head coaches, or the teams that have the Bill Belichick who doesn't call the plays, and he has his 2 coordinators who call the plays. Jets haven't gone that way in a long time.
I think it'd be the smart move. Bring in, I hope it works out and he doesn't even get fired, because then we're on the upswing. But, let's say you keep Greg Williams, and I don't know exactly what the situation would be, and then you bring in a guy like Todd Monken, or who was that coach from, I think it was Iowa or Iowa State a couple of years ago, who I think Campbell or whatever it was, maybe, who was getting consideration from the Jets. I'm not sure if he's an offensive guy, to be completely honest, but I think that might be the way they should go, because I don't think Gase is a guy in the locker room who is largely liked. I think there are some guys who like him. Obviously, we saw Alex Lewis come out and speak about him and like him, but there's been issues. The Quincy Nunwa thing, the Colecchio Assembly thing, whatever side you're on with those, obviously that was an issue, even though KO, I kind of think he knew he had an injury and tried to get out of his contract, whatever. But I think he tried to steal money from the Jets. That's just my opinion. But I like Gase in terms of a play caller better than others do. I just think he needs to simplify it down at times and not try to outsmart himself, because when he does, deploy the concepts that some of the concepts I see. I think he should build upon them, make it a simpler offense. But I think with more talent this year, we will produce more. But at the same time, last year, you'd see games like the Cowboys, and then you'd also see, even in that Cowboys game, the second half, how much did we do in the second half? Or versus the Bengals, or versus these teams where the Jets weren't putting up points, the Bills backups, we weren't putting up any points, So there are some definite concerns, but I think the people who compare him to Kotite, like you said, is ridiculous. I don't think that's the case.
Yeah, and you talked about Polak, and Bell's not the easiest guy to throw into an offense too. Bell's running style with an offensive line.
Not behind a bad offensive line. No way.
Not the easiest thing. But speaking of Bell and Gore and P. Ryan, which I think they're going to rotate a lot this year, the weapons, last topic, the weapons around Sam Darnold as a whole, what do you think? In my personal opinion, I think a lot of it depends on development ceilings. How high can their development ceiling be? And that is dependent on how the trenches play in a lot of cases. And I don't think it's hard to anticipate, right? It's hard to know when that's coming, what it's going to look like. Nania, what do you think about the weapons for Sam Darnold this year?
Yeah, and to start out with Bell, it really comes, and Joe, you said like him behind a bad offensive line is not a good matchup, just not a good mix. Not that any running back is, but for him in particular, he doesn't have that breakaway speed to make up for it every now and then. And with him being so patient, if the block is never going to come, it's just not going to go anywhere. So that was not a good mix last year. So for him, it's really dependent on that offensive line, because what we saw in Pittsburgh was you pair him with a very good offensive line that's consistently blocking plays up really well, and he's going to make the most out of those blocks more often than most other players do just because of his patience and vision. So the better the offensive line is, he's going to get exponentially better with it. And the fact that the highest paid running back in the league is so dependent on the O-line just speaks back to how much value that position has lost, why you don't pay that much money for a running back. But still, in terms of the Jets this year, the better the O-line can be, Bell's just going to get better and better, more so than other running backs do because of his style. So that's going to be really important. Because the running game last year is just an absolute zero, did nothing for them whatsoever, other than punching in a few touchdowns from the goal line. 1st and 10 they're the worst team in the league in that situation, running the ball. And just about every down and distance they were. So that can't happen again. That doesn't help your quarterback at all. And that all starts with the O-line. And then to the tight end position, that I think that's going to be, because of the lack of depth at receiver, I think Griffin and Herndon will be about as involved as any other tight end duo in the league. And Herndon coming back is going to be a big boost. I think Darnold really missed him in the red zone, but also in scramble drills. They just had such a good camaraderie on those. Herndon had a really good knack for adjusting his routes, especially later in the season. You look at the Texans game, a lot of moments where he was just connecting with Darnold on those scramble plays, which was Darnold's signature ability, but we just didn't really see it that much this year. And I think losing Herndon was a big part of that. So the numbers Herndon put up over the last 12 weeks of 2018, he was a top 10 tight end. So if he can do that again, and you also get Ryan Griffin's production as a tight end too, it could be one of the better duos in the league. From a receiving standpoint, the blocking has to be a lot better. That was a huge issue. Hopefully Wesco can help out that a little bit. But Griffin and Daniel Brown's blocking was not good at all last year. That was a huge problem. But at receiver, in the slot, you have Crowder, who's a top 10 slot receiver, somewhere around there. So he's definitely going to fill that role well. But it comes down to Perriman and Mims, really, on the outside. Both guys have such high ceilings, but the floor is low. For Mims, just because he's a rookie, you don't know what he's going to get. I think long-term he has a tremendous ceiling. His game is just really impressive all around. Just not only the production, what he does all around as a receiver is good. And what he does as a blocker is going to be huge, because the Jets receivers last year, they couldn't block either. It was way beyond just the O-line, the blocking. It was the tight ends, it was the receivers. So Mims could help out with that a lot. He's a great blocker. But in terms of the receiving from that outside duo, Perriman and Mims, what Mims does as a rookie is going to be huge. Just like Becton, they're going to be relying on these two guys to come right in and play well for them. So they're going to have a lot of pressure on them. And that could backfire, at least for this year. So we'll see what Mims does. But Perriman is going to be interesting, because what he did in December this past year, and even through a few moments throughout last year at Tampa Bay, because he wasn't getting a lot of targets. You have Mike Evans and Chris Godwin. That's going to happen. But in the final 5 games of the season, he was fantastic. But there's the first stretch of extended production that he's had in his career. Was missed his entire rookie season, and then 2 seasons with Baltimore and with Cleveland. Season after that, never really was able to find a niche and had struggled quite a bit with drops, just not separating and overall not producing quite mostly throughout his first 4 years in the league. So the floor is low with Perriman, I think, but the ceiling he showed is very high. What's most likely, I think, is that he settles in somewhere in between there. But the range that you could get from him is really wide. He can go very low, or he can go do what he did in December of 2019, which is one of the better receivers in the league. I don't think that's likely, but just the talent that he showed in December is really impressive. And to go along with what Herndon brings, matching Darnold's scrambling ability, I think Mims and Perriman really match that too. Both guys are very good contested catch receivers, and that's something the Jets have not had a lot of. If they've had anyone you can consider a good contested catch receiver in Darnold's 2 years, I don't think they have. But these 2 guys definitely do that. So with Mims and Perriman and Herndon back, I think you have 3 receivers who match up with Darnold's his aggressiveness, his ability to extend the play really well, something that he lacked last year. Didn't have anyone to really trust in those situations. So I think those 3 guys are really good matches to him skill set wise. But I think the 2 biggest X factors in terms of the skill positions are Bell in that offensive line. I think he'll get exponentially better with the production of the run blocking. And then at outside receiver, what are Perriman and Mims going to bring to the table? How quickly does Mims get off the ground? And then Perriman, just who is he? Because we've seen such a wide range from him throughout his career. But overall, I think it's definitely below average right now. But what those 2 outside receivers do, what Herndon does coming back is there's a lot of potential, I think. Like you said, Robbie, if the offensive line can give them the chance, I think the ceiling is high for this unit. But we'll see what happens.
Yeah, I think there's like a wide range of outcomes that can happen. I think they improved on every position, at least going into the year in terms of like assuming health as compared to last year. Running back's kind of a wash. I like Ty Montgomery. They didn't use him enough, in my opinion. I actually liked what he showed on film. But replacing him with Gore, Gore is a guy I'm higher on than some other people. Like I said, message the most knowledgeable Bills guy I know. Broke down all the film, and he was used like strictly on short yardage situations and things like that. So yeah, his yards per carry is going to be low. But with saying that, I also don't want him to out rep P. Ryan in a year where P. Ryan needs to develop. If we were going for a playoff run, yeah, sure. Gore can get more reps than P. Ryan, but running back's kind of a wash. Tight end, it's kind of similar as last year. If I'm not mistaken, we brought in Griffin like week 3 or whatever last year. Like it wasn't. It was
early. I don't know if it was before. Was it after week 1?
He was there for the season opener, but he came late in the offseason.
Okay, it must have been late.
Okay, yeah. So I like what they have at tight end. Versus what they had last year, it's obviously an improvement because you have Herndon back. Now, Herndon, I'm a little bit lower on him than some people are. I'm not saying that he can't be a good tight end, but at the same time, his rookie year, yeah, he made some catches, but a lot of those were open catches. And like you said, Nania, he adjusted to Darnold well. But there's nothing I saw from him that was like, oh, this guy's going to be ridiculous and continue to produce. I think there's a lot of situations, kind of like Griffin last year. He's running wide open and just caught the ball. I think he could be a good tight end. Maybe could even be top 10, sure, but he's just not like Jets fans assume that he's like a top 5 guy, top 10 guy already, which I don't think is the case. So, but with saying that, also I think that it's an improvement having him back over guys I had last year. You're hoping that Wesco obviously takes a step up, which he did towards the end of last year. We mentioned Bell. And you laid it out well. Now I really don't have to add anything to that. And it seemed like later in the year, he started hitting the holes that were open because he knew that no other holes going to open for the Jets offensive line. If the hole's open for the Jets offensive line last year, probably even more this year, you got to hit it because there's no hole that's going to open up again because they get swallowed up in the run game because there's not a good offensive line at this point. But with saying that about the offensive line, Last year they were 31-32 with the Dolphins, whichever one you want to argue for the worst. Based on stats, I think it was actually the Dolphins who were 32nd, but even 31st. Even if they could take a step up from 31st to 22nd, which I think they can, that's a massive, massive upgrade for Darnold and what he's seen in his first 2 years, where they've been bottom 3 unit, his first 2 years of his career. And I think they will. I'm taking Becton over Beachum. Beachum was a complete non-factor in the run game, and anybody with strength in the pass game would bull rush him. And I didn't like him in the pass game either, really. So I'm taking him over Beachum. Lewis, I think he's okay. I think he's a little bit hyped up because he's a rah-rah guy. I think he's below average. McGovern is a top 10, 12 guy, which is obviously a big addition from what we had in the last couple of years, especially considering a young quarterback, a guy who can point out the defense to you is huge for a young guy. So that's underrated position, I think, on the offensive line. I think it's left tackle, right tackle, center. And in my opinion, I think a center is really, really, really important, especially for a young kid. So, which obviously helped out Sanchez. You look at Mangold and stuff like that when he was a young kid. So that's an improvement. Van Roten versus Winters. So that's a guy I'm higher on. I might be lower on a guy like Herndon, but I'm a little bit higher on Van Roten than some others are. I think he could be, even below average starter is an upgrade from what it was last year when you're looking at the injuries and what Winters has been at sometimes. I'm surprised they haven't cut him yet. And talking about the defense too, I'm hoping they cut Winters and sign Logan Ryan, because I think a Logan Ryan would be a huge addition to the defense. And then Fant, I've been I think I've been outspoken with Fant. I don't think every situation is linear. I think too many people in the football spectrum look at a situation, okay, if he's not good by year 2, 3, then he's not a good player. I don't think that's always the case. I think with him I'm sure Nania could spout the stats about how many games he started in his career, but he hasn't started many for a 28-year-old.
Only 18. It says he started like 25 games, but sometimes he'll just start and rotate through. But start and finish the game playing tackle, only 18 games so far.
Okay, and 28-year-old offensive lineman is not a 28-year-old corner or receiver or whatever it may be. So he has time to develop, and I think that his ceiling. I'm not even saying his ceiling. I think he could be a decent starting tackle. I think even below average tackle this year is an upgrade from last year as well. So I think he could be that. His development from late 18 to mid 19 to end of 19 was drastic, in my opinion. I started watching the 18 film. I was like, people are going to hate me putting up this review. Like it's disgusting. And then that Ravens game, that Niners game late in the year were really positive to me. He struggled a little bit in the next game, which I believe was against the Eagles, which I think Nania messaged me. He's like, it wasn't as good as you said, but I didn't. I did the film review like 3 months ago, but he definitely took steps in the right direction for sure. He has the athleticism. He has the power. He has some technical issues opening up his hips, oversetting, things like that. But I think the offensive line is definitely an improvement. And then going, rounding out with receiver. That's the huge X factor, So Mims is a guy who I think obviously, throwing the ball up to him, he's going to make some plays. Red zone, he's going to make some plays, but his development from Baylor is going to be a little bit slower because of the routes he was asked to run and the lack of routes he was asked to run. So developing that in the NFL is going to be, an issue. But at the same time with him, and the reason I compared him to AJ Green for his body frame, and I remember us talking to Slack, me breaking down a hitch route. Like there's not a lot of websites doing that, breaking down hitch routes, and his athleticism that he shows for the size he has is ridiculous. You see the 3-cone time. There are times where he gets out of a route break really, really quickly with bad technique. So if he cleans that up with a coach in Jefferson, who coaches son Van Jefferson to be one of the best route runners in the country, if he develops that with his catch radius, with his hands, with his frame, he can be a really, really good player. I'm just not sure how quick it happens because of the way he was used at Baylor, 1, 2, the offseason. Obviously, every rookie is starting from behind the 8 ball this offseason. So how quickly does it develop? I'm not sure. Year 1, you're looking at maybe 500, 600, 700 yards. I think at max, he's not going to be like 1,000-yard guy or anything like that year 1. But for this year, big question mark for him. Development great in the future. Perryman's another guy I'm higher on. A lot of people reference the 4 or 5 game stretch, which is obvious from a statistical standpoint when he produced, but there's plenty of times, and I put it up on Twitter the other day, where he burns Darius Slay for what could have been a 95-yard touchdown that wasn't in those 5 weeks, being the fourth fiddle on offense behind O.J. Howard, behind Godwin, behind Evans. He wasn't targeted a lot. He was the third or fourth progression, not the first or second. So he was an afterthought in the offense at times, and there was plenty of times where Jameis Winston, being Jameis Winston, wouldn't see him or would completely miss him down the field. So so I think it was a good year from Perryman, but at the same time, that's his one good year. And to be honest, I haven't watched him at the Ravens. I didn't watch him with the Browns, so I don't know. But he is a guy who I know you agree with, Robbie, that he is more talented than Robbie Anderson for sure.
I like him more in terms of talent, but reliability.
Yes,
He's
of course.
Been injured. He's been injured so often, and Robbie Anderson's more reliable. There's no.
If I had to take a 1-to-1 guy right now, I'm taking Anderson over Perryman because, like you said, what he's done. But in terms of body frame, ability to run routes, because even with that frame, his ability to pluck balls and make contested catches are all much better than Anderson. Yak, definitely think he can get over Anderson. I don't know if Anderson broke 1 tackle in his career. I don't know if he ever will, and that's why I was confused to see him on end arounds and things like that in his career. He's just so skinny. 190. I'm calling BS on that. There's no way he's 190.
No.
There's absolutely no way. He's 170 soaking wet.
Yeah.
So I think the receiver room has more upside than it did last year for sure. And like you said, with the blocking, important. Perryman, I think he's a decent blocker. I've seen him on some blocks, and then Mims, which is the thing I watch for on film, and people will say, wide receiver blocking doesn't matter. BS. I'm calling BS on that too. It does matter. They
should just watch some film last year of how many times Thomas Anderson blew blocks and Bell got stuff because of it. It really matters.
Yeah, your top 3 guys who are blocking on screens. Thomas, who I think can block, it didn't look like he was interested in blocking at all. Robbie Anderson.
Yeah, I don't know what the deal with Thomas was. There were so many plays where he just wouldn't block last year.
Yeah, he was in it for the paycheck. It seems like guys like Tremaine Johnson, him. So you have Anderson, who I don't know if he could block one of us. Obviously, a joke, but you have him. You have Crowder, who's a small guy. So Robert's blocking matters, especially for a team who runs a lot of screens and things like that, and is a quick hitting type offense. West Coast more than other. I would say that's the closest offense to identify the Jets with. Wide receiver blocking matters, and not even with just the X's and O's of wide receiver blocking. It shows me, and I don't know if I'm supposed to curse in here, which I won't. It shows me that you're not soft, and that matters to me. There was times where Greg Dortch would give up, and that's why I didn't think he would make it. Things like that. So wide receiver blocking matters. They have that this year. So I think the upside is better. Herndon, assuming health. I'm taking personally Perryman, Mims, Crowder over Anderson, Thomas, Crowder. Over last year. I'm taking the offensive line over what they had last year. I think running back's a wash. And I think just that running game, like you said before, I didn't hit on it. The difference between 2nd and 12 and 2nd and 7 for Darnold this year is going to be massive. That opens up your playbook a ridiculous amount, changes the defense and the looks that Darnold's going to get. They're not going to stack the box as much, hopefully. And something Nani's going to get to this, because especially if the season goes to like October, which I think they should push it back at this point, to be completely honest. Sam Darnold's also an underrated QB sneaker, which I think is something that happened a lot on 3rd and 4th and 1, where he would convert, where he's pretty smart with how he sneaks the ball, which again is something that Tom Brady was really, really good at in his career. So with all the breakdowns that Nania is doing, I'm sure that he's going to do QB sneak soon, because I don't know what else he can do. So I'm sure that's going to come down the pike at some point. But yeah, the offense has potential. I think it could be a below average unit, but I think that's a big upgrade from 31st, 32nd last year. And obviously with that, the better offensive line, how does Darnold develop? I think getting Darnold on the move more, things like that would help. And like you said, with the receivers too, he's a guy who, you want the shifty slot guy and Crowder, but he's the guy to extend plays. You want that big guy who could win those contested catches for him, which he never had before. So I think adding guys like Perryman and Mims fits Darnold more. So the offense has more potential. The defense is better. It's a better team than it was last year. Is that reflected by the record? I don't know. It's dependent on health, which the Jets were historically injured last year, by the way. But the schedule is a lot harder. So did they finish 7-9, 8-8, but are a much better team? I think that's most likely the case. So they have some development to go, but they have potential.
What's Mims's injury history? I know he had the hand, right? That caused him to drop passes. Anything else besides that in college?
I don't think anything that held him out of games.
Yeah, I don't think so.
Okay. Yeah, because Perryman, Mims, or Perryman and Herndon, that's a concern right off the bat. Just staying healthy. It's as simple as anything, but these guys got to stay healthy. But yeah, that'll wrap it up for us for the first time getting together. I think we'll do it again. Check it out. Check out the shop. We're going to be starting to push it again. JetXShop.com, JetsXFactor.com.
Connor McGovern approved.
Connor McGovern approved. Was that his kid? That was his kid, right?
I don't know if it was his kid or his brother or his cousin, whatever it was, but the McGoverns rock the McGovern.
He's
shirt,
a McGovern.
So. Yeah,
we know
that. The McGovern family is rocking the Run CMG shirts. Whose idea was that? I think that was Nania's, right?
That definitely wasn't mine.
That was
taking credit.
Nania's
we still need to push a Mim shirt. I'm just saying that. I still want to
get the Mims. We're going to get the Mims this week. We're going to get the Mims.
All right.
So JetsXFactor.com. Look at Blewett's film on YouTube. Nania, his numbers are, I don't know how he does it. And Blewett doesn't know. Nania's. It's insane.
No, and I'm not doing this to insult you. Do you work as well?
Right now, it's just this.
Okay, that makes a little bit more sense because I work a full-time job. I can't, but the numbers that you come up with, like 100 reasons to believe, how? Like, how does that? I don't get it, but kudos to you.
I asked the same question myself, honestly.
Hey,
there has to be times where you're typing stuff. I'm like, why and how am I doing this?
My sister's a math teacher.
The time.
My sister's a math teacher too, and I don't know how she does it. The numbers, me and numbers don't jive for some reason. I can't do it. But until next time, we'll catch you guys later.